Okay, hi. My hopes for the audio with this presentation is that I can upload this onto YouTube and then attach the link for the video to my slides. That way you can follow along with it, and I'll just tell you which slide to be on next alongside the audio. Um, I apologize that my voice is a little groggy. I've been sick for the past 7 days. It's been pretty rough, but luckily, no COVID. So that's great. Anyway, for my assignment, I decided to focus on the album True That by Michael Cera, as we can see on the first slide. And now we'll go ahead and get into the second slide. Here, I break down the kind of motive behind the album and just some facts about it. So, True That consists of 18 songs. It was released in 2014, and it is Cera's only album. So, he didn't make any before or after. And there's no particular objective. Michael Cera kind of describes the album as just being a collection of home experiences. He didn't market the album at all. He didn't tell anyone that he was making it, aside from a few friends that knew. And that was mostly because he didn't want to sell it. He considers it to be limited because his experience and knowledge with music is limited in itself. He didn't see it as something that was worthy of gaining money or really any traffic. He just was doing it for fun. Um, his friends would occasionally get sent audios from his work that he was doing at home, and they, kind of pushed him to release music to the public, and he didn't want to, but eventually they pushed him enough that now we have the one album. Um, he didn't plan to do anything with it or really go anywhere with a music career. It was just, as he said, a collection of home experiences. When he wasn't working and he wasn't on set, he would play around with his instruments at home and do some recordings. He notes that you can hear some of the edits within the songs, and you can tell that he hasn't had any um, vocal lessons, and he has just really played around with a few chords on the guitar and a few piano keys. And he does experiment with some drums later on in the album, but otherwise, it is, as he says, a limited album. But I think that it's really good. It's one of my favorites, and I'm excited to be talking about it with other people because I feel like it is not commonly known about. It was really under the radar. Again, he didn't put out any marketing for the album. So now we'll move on to slide three. For slide three, I talk about his followings and creations. So on Spotify, he only has about, we'll round up and say 400,000 monthly listeners, which isn't really that much. Um, he only has one single from 2017, and it's called Best I Can, with Sharon Van Eaton. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but it was a collaboration. It's nice, kind of lo fi. And then otherwise, he appears on the Juno soundtrack, Paper Heart soundtrack, and the Lemon soundtrack. So he just has some things that he did for the movies that he's worked on. Um, that's kind of his whole discography, really. He doesn't have a big music career. I just thought that it was important to note um, that he, again, is limited in experience. We'll go on to slide four. So, the reason I chose this album specifically is because it went under the radar. Whenever I talk about Michael Cera's music, my friends are always really confused. I actually had a friend one time that thought I was joking, and I was like, "No, he has an album and it's pretty good. I thoroughly enjoy it. I've been listening to it since I was 15, I think. I again really enjoy the album. So that's one thing. I want to bring awareness of the album's existence to people that I can. Also, the album just kind of reminds me of this time of year The transition from fall to winter is a kind of, I feel like for the vast majority, a depressing time. Um, the time change, the weather going from really nice to really cold, it makes us all kind of groggy, or at least for me. And I do struggle with not the best mental health, and I feel like I always have kind of a rough patch during this time of year. And the album really gets into those kind of deep, dark mental health places that we can experience and that we might experience, regularly. And I feel like it's just so raw because, again, these are his home experiences. It's not anything that he really thought that he was going to be sharing with other people. So it is just out of pure emotion. And I feel like it's truly relatable in that sense. So when this time comes around, I listen to the album a lot because it's kind of comforting to know that I'm not the only one struggling in that aspect. And then Christmas comes and I'm fine again because I love Christmas and it gets me through. Anyway, I wish that Michael Cera would have made more music. I do respect that that's not his goal and that it was just a hobby and we don't have to make hobbies our jobs. That's what changes it from being a hobby to a job. So I get it. I respect it. I just wish that he would have made more music. So with that album existing and being probably the only one that will exist, I would like to talk about it and share it with those that I can. Also, this album somewhat tightened my bond with my uncle. Um, we were pretty close when I was younger due to me growing different music tastes and him kind of having the same, and we would show each other different albums. And um, this album was one that I showed him. And then there's a cover of a song, which we'll get into later, that's on the album, and he sent me the original because I didn't know it was a cover, and we talked about it. So the album's very dear to me, I guess. We'll go to slide 5. So, what does this sound like? Um, True That is a collection of folk and instrumental tracks. A lot of the tracks on the album do count as lo-fi, I believe, but we don't talk about lo-fi um, in our textbook, so it's hard for me to go off of like the textbook standpoint for that genre, so I don't really talk about it in this presentation. But it is an indie record. Michael produced it himself. He worked on it all by himself. It's all him. So it is an indie folk album. I would say it's folk because it's very simplistic. It uses more um, like raw acoustics, and although there is some editing and voice echoes in there, it does feel very folk-ish to me, like early folk. One of the songs that he covers is a folk country song, so that's important to note. Um, it's very simplistic, as I said. There's a lot of piano. I love the piano. It's very simple, but um, kind of cheerful in a way for some of the songs because there are dark meanings, as I said, and then we have some happy moments. A lot of the plain instrumental tracks, they're simplistic and plain, as I said, but they feel happy. And then the ones with the lyrics kind of get into the mentality that we might have or might experience. Um, Cera says that the album speaks for itself. And I feel like with the knowledge of music creation that he has, that's an accurate statement. Um, it's just it's just what it is. It's how he expressed himself to him, in his own home, to himself and to his friends when he decided to share his works. Um, I do want to also mention that the album cover is just a picture that his sister took of him with her boyfriend's daughter. Um, Cera said that he chose this picture because it was just something that was, just a home experience. It was just him with his niece, and he just enjoys how comfortable she is around him, and he finds that to be so valuable. He says that he takes it very personally when a child does not like him because they are the most honest humans that you can come across. And so seeing that she genuinely enjoyed being around him really sparked a, positive note for him. We'll go to slide 6. His inspiration. He had inspiration that came from artists like Neil Young, John Cale, Alden Penner, which was his friend, who was in a band called the Unicorns, I believe, Roger Miller, and Michael Hurley. So these are some artists that he just referenced, or again, his friend Alden, who he spoke to in regards to the album's creation. Slide 7, we're going to compare and contrast. I talked about earlier there was a folk country song that Michael covered that's called Clay Pigeons by Blaze Foley. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. So I have a compare and contrasting slide, sorry, of this song, and I have links to both versions. Sierra's version does feel more like a folk rendition. He doesn't use that thick country accent in his approach with this song, while the original is country folk, so it does have that thick accent and just some of those deeper country notes. The original is thinner in texture and is just an acoustic guitar, but Sierra's rendition is thicker in texture. He adds piano. He still has the acoustic guitar there, but he adds some piano notes, and I quite like it. I feel like they work well together. Sierra's is faster in speed with higher notes. I feel like he chose higher notes just to match his pitch because he does have a higher voice. And the original vocalist has lower notes and the rhythm is a lot slower. I feel like Sierra kind of added in those higher notes and added in the piano to match with his higher voice because he might not be able to meet those lower notes. The original vocalist has very deep vocals. The original has talking in the intro. It was used in a movie, I believe, from the research I did. That's when the song was introduced. So there's just a scene from the movie talking in the beginning of the song. But there is no talking intro in the cover that Michael Cera did. His cover is also longer by 6 seconds and uses voice echoes. He does use editing and he harmonizes with his own voice. The original does not have any voice echoes. Again, it's thinner in texture. It's slower and kind of just very deep. It sounds like the vocalist is really using his lower diaphragm, and both are very emotional, I feel like. Also, I forgot to mention that Michael Cera changed the lyrics. So the original lyrics in the first song by Foley have all are the same, but the beginning, sorry, I'm pulling it up. He says that Foley says, I'm going down to the Greyhound station, gonna get a ticket to ride, gonna find that lady with 2 or 3 kids and sit down by her side. But Michael Cera, in his cover, he says, I'm going down to the railway station, gonna get a ticket to ride, find a big fat lady with 2 or 3 kids and sit down by her side. So there's just a small change in the lyrics. That's it. Otherwise, the lyrics are the same, just a small change. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure why he decided to change specifically those like 2 sentences, but it is what it is. I still like the song. I do have a preference for Michael's cover just because I didn't know about the original until after I'd already fallen in love with Michael's version, so it's kind of hard to go back to that and decide that I want the original, even though to me it's not the original. It's not the first one that I heard. on to slide 8. I just wanted to talk about my favorite tracks. The first one is What Gives. I Can't Live Like This, and I do have it linked. What Gives is one of the songs on the track where he experiments with drums. You can hear slight drums and tambourines in the background. And again, he describes it as, a limited experience, limited knowledge. So it's not the best, but I do feel like it was nice to see him play around with the drums in the track. And it's one of those songs that talks about, deeper meaning and kind of existential dread, which, we hear about those more serious topics in early folk. And yeah, it really talks about mental health and kind of the tiresome ways of trying to go on when, we don't really know why we are. And yeah, sorry, I'm babbling, but I feel like it's important to talk about. I'm pulling up the lyrics right now, and they're very simple. It's literally just, hey now, what gives? I don't think it goes like this. I can't live like this. And that's repeated, but the texture is really nice. We have some acoustic guitar, piano, the drums, the tambourine. There's some voice edits and echoes, and he harmonizes with himself. And there's a part where there's a young child coming in. It might have been his niece. It's not mentioned in any of the interviews I looked at, but I don't know. I feel like even though the lyrics are so simple, it really just touches on the extremities of mental health. And then the other song is Those Days. I honestly probably prefer that one lyric wise, but I wanted to include What Gives because of the drum experimentations. But I'm pulling up the lyrics for Those Days. Those Days is specifically one of the tracks that really gets into mental health and just kind of the roughness of a bad patch. The lyrics specifically talk about suicide and how if you saw someone like him, you would be afraid, you would be worried. It specifically says, see a guy like that walking down the street, you'd nearly leave your skin. He's proud to say he's got his wits about him. Take a look at the shape you're in. And it's really a reflection on kind of who we are as people and the ways that we behave and interact and how we treat one another, but also kind of the entrance of that bad mental health state. He talks about all the faith you have left is in your medicine. So open up wide and swallow that pride and long for a comfort that the world won't provide. So it's just kind of an acceptance of, this is how it is, but also in a way of reflecting, seeing yourself from the outside as well as inside. It kind of puts in perspective the things that you should change and the things that you would lose if you didn't put up a fight during those days. And then the last side is just my sources. If you'd like to check them out, they're just interviews that Sierra did around the time that the album was released. But yeah, that's it for the album. Yeah,